We must ask the public to be extremely vigilant and to report anything suspicious they see, not to touch parcels, etc., but to contact the police immediately they see anything suspicious.
Why is nobody interested in this? Why, you know it's real. And they said, we do know it's real. And they said, but unfortunately, our Prime Minister and people in our government would rather have London destroyed than believe that you're real.
And the report says very few in the government took Osama bin Laden's organisation seriously until too late.
The police had rehearsed just this sort of scenario in the heart of the capital. They were prepared and their response showed that.
Hello?
Now, you've had various premonitions, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and tell us about those.
Well,
as a scientist, the only conclusion that I can reach is that Christopher's the real deal.
Okay, it's 7:03 in the morning of the 2nd of August. I really don't know what on earth is going on, but here is my dream notes.
I really don't want to know what's going to happen in the future. That's probably why I've kept a little bit away from him.
Chris Robinson's state at this point would be almost tortured.
Is this beyond your experience?
Beyond my imagination. Imagine if you could be having dreams about something absolutely horrific happening and you knew that if you could just get the information to the right people, it might be prevented.
Christopher Robinson lives in an ordinary house, on an ordinary street, and has an ordinary job. But he claims to have extraordinary dreams. Dreams that show patterns of events that have yet to occur. He says his premonitions seem to foresee serious crimes, terrorist acts, and other disasters before they actually happen. When he wakes up, he goes to work as a cleaner in a small town just outside of London.
Well, basically you need to earn a living, because you're not going to earn any money out of doing this. So I do cleaning. So I work about between 31 and 35 hours a week for minimum wage to pay the bills.
Christopher has been regularly haunted by his dreams for many years. At first he was scared and mystified, but over time he has learnt not only how to read the cryptic messages in the dreams, but also how to manipulate where the dreams are directed. Is it really possible to dream the future? Are we all capable of this? And if premonitions are impossible, why does Chris claim to keep having them?
A precognition is something that is desperately important. It involves the whole subconscious. There is a desperate need to know.
The whole idea of precognition, somehow clairvoyance, somehow power to see something that hasn't happened yet or is beyond the immediate senses is very much a part of history.
When you come to precognition, it just defies all logic. It just can't happen. You know, how can you know about something that hasn't happened yet?
Opinion is divided. Traditional Western science believes that Christopher's claims are impossible, and skeptics call him a fake. However, history is filled with famous premonitions, and every day ordinary people all over the world have extraordinary dreams.
I had never heard of Christopher Robinson, or even someone like Christopher Robinson. And I'll never forget the day I received a phone call claiming that he was able to see this future in his dreams, claiming that he had been assisting in terrorist activity and also in other criminal investigations.
When I realised that this was real, I then was forced to confront what might be happening.
The whole subject of whether it's possible for someone to foretell the future is one that opens a lot of philosophical questions for many of us. It would require changing our worldview if that were really possible.
When the dream started in 1989 and I started sending them to the police quite quickly saw that something was happening, and they arranged an introduction for me with Dr. Keith Hearn.
In November 1991, Chris approached Dr. Hearn with yet another ongoing dream that he believed to be a premonition.
There was a dream I had about 2 terrorists from the IRA planting a bomb in a bank in St. Albans.
At the time, he was keeping in touch with me by telephone. I was also visiting him, and he had this dream running about something happening in St. Albans, and he knew something big was going to happen.
And the dream was quite visual. I was looking down on St. Albans Abbey, and there were 2 dogs running through the park. Now, for some time, I had equated and realised that if I dream of a dog, it's a killer or a terrorist.
He could decode his dreams. If there was snow, this meant that something was very imminent. If there were cups, this meant that certain victims. And he got very good at deciphering them.
As I watched these 2 dogs run through the park, they became human beings. 1 man and 1 woman. They then walked along the high street, and one of them was carrying a padded envelope. As the dogs came through the park, obviously that's cryptic, I was seeing the actual scene that was going to take place, and the two people, the man and the woman, had come along the high street and placed the bomb, which was in a padded envelope, through the letterbox of the bank that was there. At which point it blew up, they blew to pieces, and I woke up from the dream.
Now, I do understand that he then told a sergeant at Luton police station, someone he knew, about the events, and it happened the next day.
And basically from the dream information, I decided that 1 man, 1 woman, both terrorists, were going to blow up a bank in St. Albans on a Friday night. Arrangements were made that I would be at home that Friday night in case it happened. And about 10:10 I got a telephone call from Sergeant Clements saying all hell's broken loose in St. Albans, we need you over here. And of course when I got over there was a cordon round the town, and I was trying to explain to these 2 policemen at the cordon that I was a psychic and they wanted to see me, and he said, I'm Father Christmas, get on the bike and sort of get out of here. Eventually I managed to get them to radio in and say I was there, at which point of course they took me in, and I had meetings with some police and military people in St. Albans that night.
At St. Albans, as the bomb was being primed, it went off, killing both terrorists instantly. The bombers were the only casualties.
They said it wasn't a bank, it was a car bomb. I said, what do you mean it was a car bomb? I said, of course it wasn't a car bomb, it was a bank. I said, they put the bomb through the letterbox. No, that bit you're wrong about. Eventually they said, all right, we were just testing. We wanted to see how convinced you were that it wasn't a car bomb. They took me up to the scene, and I walked around the town like a sniffer dog. But it was an unholy mess, really. There were bits of people in the trees and scattered around everywhere. The bank front had been completely blown out. There were broken windows everywhere.
This was so very specific. It's not as if it's vague. He's decoded this perfectly. There was an explosion. by two banks. There would be two bombers. They would both die. I don't see how more accurate that could get, to be honest. Premonitions, they've been around for as long as human writing has been there. The ancient Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians all spoke about premonition dreams. They were well recorded.
Well, I mean, stories of precognition certainly go back to the times of the Old Testament. They were always prophesying things.
In the Bible, of course, there's the story of Joseph, who interpreted the dream of the Pharaoh about the 7 fat and thin cattle, indicating 7 good years and then bad years. Again, it's symbolism, just as Chris Robinson is having. It needs to be decoded.
The question is often raised, why is this information so convoluted, so cryptic, often symbolic, and so on? And I think there are multiple reasons that one should look for. Number one, dreams typically are of that sort. And so if you're going to be getting information during dreams, the dream process is going to color the information you're getting.
And oftentimes these precognitive elements come in symbolic form. They might not be exact sort of replicas of what's actually going to happen, but they're close enough to indicate that there's actually something taking place.
The language of dreams, the language of these altered states, is not the rational, logical language that we tend to use in our waking awareness. It's the language of geometries. It's the language of symbols.
The second reason is that if this information is actually intelligently given, so it's not just that Christopher is going into some library in the sky and just pulling information out of a book or playing back a tape, but if this information is actually being presented to him, then there's going to be some intelligence in terms of what information is given and how it's given.
The week before Princess Diana was killed, a reporter called Claire Pillinger had phoned me up and asked if she could come and see me. And she specifically wanted me to try and dream about Princess Diana.
But he was adamant that it was 2 very important people that were going to die.
Chris Robinson's state at this point would be almost tortured.
In the dream, you often see the heads coming off as a representation of sudden death.
'97 was a long time ago, but basically I was photographing for the Daily Mail people who claimed to have some degree of psychic powers. And it was quite interesting because this meant me travelling all over the country and photographing some people who I regarded didn't have psychic powers. In fact, to be truthful, I believe the vast majority of them didn't. But one of the people who I did photograph was Chris Robinson. That's when I came into contact with Chris.
Chris was quite a well-known psychic at the time. He'd had a few dreams about the IRA and so on, and I was asked to go along and interview him to accompany an article which Drew Gardner was taking photographs for.
Claire Pillinger had phoned me up and said could she come and interview me, and one of the reasons that she wanted to come was that Princess Diana had made some kind of announcement previously about saying 3 things that would shock the world, and could I perhaps, dream what those things might be. I dreamt of a photograph, and the photograph is one that I have of my grandparents, and in that photograph there is my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side standing outside their bungalow in Wales, In the picture, they're standing next to a car. The car exploded, or at least the engine did. The cylinder heads blew off the back of the engine. I think 3 of them. But I was looking at 2 of the cylinder pots.
The phone rang, and it was Chris. He said, I had this dream about these 2 heads fly off. It's almost like an explosion. 2 heads fly off. And he said, I don't know what it means.
He looked through his dreams notes, and he also talked about Wales. He was adamant that Wales, a place that he used to go to when he was younger, featured very prominently in his dream.
Outside my nan's house, I have my Hillman imp, Trevor, and I'm told that Trevor is all right.
And I asked who Trevor was, and he really didn't have a clue, but he just kept saying that Trevor was all right, 2 heads of families were going to die, and Wales was so prominent.
Although I didn't realise the full significance at the time, my nickname for that car is Trevor. And of course Trevor was the bodyguard who survived. Interesting. Dreams are very, very convoluted. But in this dream, we moved from the photograph to the car, to Wales, to the car exploding.
At the time, I just found it quite a strange dream. I didn't know what he was talking about.
This illustrates that Chris doesn't know what he's dreaming. He gets information, he's disturbed by it, but he doesn't know what it is, and he then has to make an interpretation from it.
Sometimes you can get a clear line and you can say, hey Christopher, it's so-and-so, and other times you can only get a visual communication with me, so you show me things that are from my own memory, you trigger my memory. At other times, you know, you can try and tell me something and I don't make any sense of it at all.
I found it quite scary, to be honest. In fact, I find meeting Chris quite a scary experience. Really, because I think that he genuinely does predict what could happen.
It's interesting to me. In my mind, Chris was definitely sent some information which made him agitated, very agitated, but he didn't know what it was.
He knew something was going to happen, but, as I say, what could he do to stop it?
On the Saturday night, which was like the night virtually the night it happened, I spoke to Claire again and told her that whatever this was, it was going to happen.
We finished the phone call, we said, wow, isn't that amazing, what could it be? And then we woke up the next morning, Princess Diana and Dodi were dead.
I found it quite scary. I also found it fascinating. I was desperate to talk to Chris again that week. I went to see him. I wanted to find out what else he was dreaming. And that's when he had a second dream about Diana being buried on an island surrounded by water, but she wasn't really there. Even suggests that he had a dream about the truth. There is a lot of doubt as to whether Diana is actually buried on that island in Althorpe.
It's all this thing which is linked in, which in my mind is irrefutable, you know, that he is sent. He does pick up something, but I don't think he knows how to interpret it.
When we're in dreams, or when we're in what's called hypnagogic states or hypnopompic states between waking and sleep, our cultural filters are down. We're open to a much wider sense of realities than when we shut and limit ourselves when we're normally in a waking mode.
This is something that most people, if they just took the trouble to sort of write their dreams down, over a long period of time, a few months at least, they'll start to see that little bits of future events turn up in their sleeping consciousness.
We have no idea what we are as human beings, what our personalities and consciousness can hold and how we can affect the physical body. We speak about being conscious, subconscious, unconscious, trance. We speak about all these states of consciousness, but neurologists throughout the world cannot tell you what consciousness is. They can't tell you where your consciousness lies.
Well, the bottom line in all of this is we don't know what's going on. Lots of people think they know what's going on, and the general perception, certainly with me, is that in these dreams you're meeting up with deceased people. And somehow those deceased people have access to information that we ordinarily don't have access to.
I do believe in precognition. I've had precognitive experiences myself, and what's now emerging is an understanding by science as to perhaps how precognition can work. So when we have precognitive experiences, we're tapping into that causative level of reality before it becomes crystallized in the physical world.
Reality is not what we think it is, and in fact never has been. You know, reality has always been infinitely more complicated than we've thought throughout history, and it still is.
I think premonitions are telling us that science has got it wrong. If they are there, and people like Chris can show us that they do exist perhaps, then what's happening?
We are spiritual beings. There is far more to us than the body and the mind and the brain that's within our head. Our minds are much more than this. Our consciousness is much more than this. But of course science now has distanced itself so much from what it perceives as religion that it finds it very difficult to re-embrace consciousness and spirituality.
To me, they indicate that we're living in a mind world rather than a physical world. Now, this is a tremendous turnaround in science, a mentalistic universe.
Despite the frequency of reports from people who claim to have premonitions, there is no solid scientific theory as to how a premonition may occur.
In this very sad world where there are so many tragedies, etc., it is absolutely essential to carry out psychical research and find out what is a human being.
We are learning more and more about predicting the future. And if there is a larger spiritual reality, and Christopher believes there is, and the evidence that I've been getting from multiple sources indicates that there is, then it would make sense that that spiritual reality and that higher intelligence would want to assist us so that we can make wiser choices.
Good evening from the heart of London. 24 hours ago, I was standing right here celebrating one of the greatest days in the history of this city. Tonight, we're reporting on one of its darkest, the day London came under terrorist attack.
I need you to move this way, please, as quick as you can.
President Bush was coming over for the G8 summit, and I'd had a number of dreams which indicated that there would be something really nasty around that time. And my main concern was something going to happen up in Scotland?
With the 7/7 bombing, there was a G8 summit going on in Scotland, and he was telling me about that, and he was having some bad dreams about it. He knew something was going to happen, and there were lots of dogs in his dreams which indicated terrorists.
We condemn utterly these barbaric attacks.
The attacks caused chaos. All public transport across the capital was brought to a standstill. Hundreds of thousands of people left stranded, shocked and afraid.
One or two of the dreams indicated railway tunnels, and I was actually in the London Underground, and I felt, right, this is not Scotland, this is London.
These are the notes he gave me. It shows a tunnel, bang, heard 2 bangs, explosions, soot, smoke, smell meat burning and so on. And to be honest, that's what happened.
They struck in the rush hour, targeting London's commuters on this bus and on several underground trains. A tactic designed to cause maximum casualties and disruption. It was the deadly attack this city had been dreading.
The dreams gradually refined, because he thought originally it was going to be in Scotland at G8, but the dreams, I'm pretty sure now that the serious threats are not in Scotland, so I think the big one is tonight or tomorrow. His dreams showed snow, which means that something is imminent.
I could actually smell the underground smell and smell burning, and I ran out of the tunnel in that dream really scared and frightened. The night before the London bombings, I sent my last message to the United States saying, all I can now do is pray.
In August 2001, Chris was invited to test his claims scientifically in what would later become known as the Arizona experiments.
The Arizona experiments could have been set up to be an absolute blockbuster. Certainly the videos are quite infectious in the sense that, you know, one feels the excitement, and one should. You know, this is a very exciting, extraordinary set of experiments. But again, it comes back to the fact that once the dust has settled, one then has to produce an extraordinarily rigorous presentation for it to be convincing to the cold reader. Extraordinary claims require an extraordinary amount of convincing.
Number of the details, it is going to be so off the charts. But I'm not telling you where to go.
No, I know, I understand.
Wow, boy. Oh boy. This can't be beaten.
It'll never get better than this. Yeah, this is like Laurie Crow's double white crow experiments.
Early in 2001, I was doing a radio show by telephone in Sydney, Australia. And a couple of people heard me talking and sent me emails saying, have you heard of Gary Schwartz, professor in Arizona, that conducts experiments into these kind of paranormal things? And I made contact with him, told him what I could do, and asked him if he was interested in conducting any experiments.
He was desperately interested in being able to document scientifically that what he did was real. If you're going to test someone who claims to do extraordinary things, it's essential that you design the experiment to be as close as possible to what they actually do.
Dr. Schwartz asked me how best I would construct an experiment that would, in my view, as a non-scientist, demonstrate what I claim to be able to do.
The basic design of the experiment was that Christopher was going to dream about going to 10 different places, 10 consecutive days.
It wasn't just one, it was 10 dreams, and it involved selection of targets, And it involved choice of a target on the day, so that neither Chris nor Schwartz knew where they were going.
So it was decided that he would select a variety of locations, all sufficiently different from one another, that I would be taken to on different days, and I would ask the dreams in advance to show me where will I be on day 1, what will I see? Where will I be on day 2, what will I see?
Now what I did was I actually picked 20 places and then put them in envelopes, so that even though we were only going to be going to 10 of them, what this meant was that even after we'd gone to the first 9, there was still 11 possible other places that we might go. And so therefore there was no way that I could know where we were going ahead of time.
Until they were told on the phone from this magician who was selecting the targets by a random process.
To make sure that there was no way that there could be any, quote, fraud involved, what I did was I then sent the envelopes to my writing partner, William Simon, who also, by the way, belongs to the Magic Castle. He knows about fraud and so on, because we wanted to rule out any possibility of fraud.
My experience as a magician makes me feel that I'm better qualified than a lot of other people would have been to observe the experimental procedure, because I'm knowledgeable about some of the techniques that can be used to do identical kinds of things using magicians' methods.
And then what he did was he gave the envelopes to a third person. What this person did was then shuffled these 20 envelopes, remember they were sealed, and then numbered them from 1 to 20. Envelopes 1 through 10 became the 10 places we would go. Envelopes 11 through 20 became the controls. And only after that information had been recorded and videotaped did I then call Bill Simon, who then contacted the third person, and then this person opened the envelope for that day, informed Bill Simon who it was. Bill then informed me, and it was only at that point that I then knew where we were going.
So, the idea of the experiment is that Chris will dream of 10 destinations and then provide details of the locations that he will be taken to over the 10-day period.
I saw a newspaper, it was called The Sun. I was looking at a screen and there were these devices. These were like small cameras or CCDs or LCDs, I don't know.
Chris's dream notes include a telescope, a mountain, computer screens and discs, but it appears at this point that he can't make sense of what he has seen in his dream.
Pitch is a key word here, Christopher. So pitch is a key word.
Day 4 featured Chris sitting in Soho, London. He is rolling up 2 English newspapers called The Sun and The Mirror and looking through them to the sky.
Hi, we're ready to open up envelope number 4.
I actually have recently reviewed the video of that day, the video that Gary was taking as Chris gave him the clues for the day, and then when he got the phone call from me saying where they were going. First of all, he was nervous about the call because he knew there was only one place that would fit those clues.
Hello? Where? Oh boy. Oh. I was beginning to recognize that there was something that was going on that was much bigger and deeper than I had anticipated in my wildest dreams was even possible.
This is Sunday, it is the, what is it? This is for my camera.
This is August 5th.
August the 5th, and we're going to our 4th place. And I feel very strange today because when I looked at my data for the last 3 months about where I was going today, it said that it would be a Sunday.
In particular, the one day, I think it was the 4th day of the experiment, fell on a Sunday. It was the only day that Gary Schwartz had hours available for this without other appointments.
So I wrote down, test 4 will be a Sunday. Way back.
That day turned out to be something like a 2-hour drive in each direction. He could not have done that on any other day but the Sunday that he had that much time available.
Christopher saw many details that were very precise.
What are the words for today?
The words for today are pitch, are sun and mirror, are Olympus, and I said Olympus is a Greek mountain, and I was looking at the newspapers in my dream in a place in England called Soho.
But is that a key word, Soho?
No, Soho's probably not a key word.
I'm asking you what a key
but
word
it could,
are.
but it'll have a relevance somewhere.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking.
That day turned out to be at the Kitt Peak Observatory on top of a mountain outside Tucson.
Okay, we are driving up Kitt Peak, and I have now confessed to you, since you've discovered that there are observatories up there, telescopes and everything else.
And
so you've got 90%.
Doesn't go anywhere else.
Right, there's nowhere else. I have confessed the most important part of this is that I was taking you to the place where they have the largest solar observatory in the world, the largest sun telescope in the world. This is the Kitt Peak National Observatory.
Oh, look at that! I'm going to get out and take another picture with my little camera as well.
Oh boy!
Oh boy!
Oh boy! Look at this! And you got sun and Sunday and
mirror
and
CCD devices.
Right, it's all about the sun. It's all the whole thing.
The whole thing. The whole
pitch.
thing.
This angle of this telescope is pitched.
Yeah.
When I heard you reading this, and I said, "My God, if this is the Kitt Peak National Observatory, you have got more than a bullseye. You've got more than a dazzle shot. You have got the ultimate information."
And there was this extended camera.
Right.
Because I said the lens at the front of the camera was 100 away from the CCD at the back. And I couldn't imagine a camera 100 yards long.
So even though you had the Mount Olympus camera, you thought of it as a mountain.
Well, no, because I said to you, I was in Greek Street in Soho with my newspapers.
Right.
And then I said, Greek, and my camera is an Olympus.
Right.
So that gave me mountain. And of course, we did go to a mountain. And one of the fascinating things about Soho is that one of the major solar observatory projects, they use SOHO as the abbreviation for Solar Observational Helioscopic or something Observatory.
Because he knows how to take certain information and he knows how to figure out when is it literal and when is it symbolic. And so I watched him do that.
One of the stunning things to me was something that I actually printed out from my records for that day. The top is a drawing from Chris's notes from his dreams on that day, showing an object at about a 45-degree angle to the ground. When they got to the observatory, the sun telescope at the Kitt Peak Observatory is almost identical to what Chris had drawn. When you've drawn something and it matches something at the location, that's the kind of thing that's very difficult for somebody else to say, well, it was just coincidence. It's much more compelling evidence.
He saw a solar telescope. He actually constructed something that related to a sun and a telescope. And by the way, how many solar telescopes are there anywhere? And here we were, it turned out, when I actually made the phone call and discovered where we were going. We're going to Kitt Peak, which has the world's largest solar telescope.
Yes. Hey, Bill, on a scale from 0 to 10, this is 100. I'm serious.
If it was somewhere else for that day, then the experiment was a fizzle, and probably the whole rest of the 10 days he had committed to were going to be a waste of time.
whatever you've said about the first 4 days of your being here, I want you to know, this is, quote, the top. You'll never get better than this, Christopher. It's all downhill from here.
It was just, to me, either an outrageous coincidence or clearly demonstrating that the intelligence that was guiding that experiment was not only clever, but it had a sense of humour. It is August 6th.
Right?
Yes.
And this is day
5.
Day 5 of the experiment.
Day 5 was quite interesting. That was a rock shop. And my dream was about a car, specifically about a car with flat tyres. Because I see a wheel with a flat. The tyre's gone down, the air's gone out of it. I am worried about the wheel and all the air coming out.
Okay.
Because that is very, very specific.
Professor Schwartz is looking for symbols and patterns in Christopher's dreams that identify the target, although at this point in time, neither of them know the actual destination.
And again, there were things to do with meteorites, and of course this shop sold rocks and meteorites, and right outside the front door was a car with 4 flat tyres that had been there for 20 years. I mean, you know, where else would you have found that? Here's a rock shop, so we got to turn in here.
Well, we drive up to the Gem and Mineral Store. Remember, Chris did not say Gem and Mineral Store. And to the right of the Gem and Mineral Store is a car with 4 flat tires. Now, how often do you bump into a car that has 4 flat tires? Well, Christopher is really excited. He goes, right, it's just like I saw in my dreams, he said. He said, in my dreams I could walk right up to the tires.
Now, the car with the flat tires was exactly where this blue Dodge is right now. And I guess if we go inside, they might even tell you the story about the car. They certainly told us the story about it on the day we were here for the experiment.
That car that's out front.
Oh yeah, the car.
The car, how long has that car been there?
I don't know, how long have we had a car out there?
I put it out there 20 years ago.
Oh, 20 years ago.
So it's had a flat tire for 20 years.
At least one, if not 4.
Okay. At least one, if not 4 for 20 years. How you doing?
It was parked just here.
He also saw something with the car that was reminded him of the London Embassy.
And the car is Ambassador.
It was a Rambler Ambassador. London Embassy? Ambassador?
There's a fence and all these tyres, and this is a perimeter fence.
He also saw tires along a chain link fence. He saw umbrellas, lots of umbrellas.
There's an umbrella.
He saw something to do with the Spirit of God, and also something about me needing a credit card in order to get into the building.
And then we've got some sort of card, and it goes in a slot. Now, after we'd been to this site, we went back to the hotel and we did a filming of the interview, and Gary'd run out of tape, and I'd almost run out.
I said, Christopher, on the way to the lab, would you mind if we stopped at the store? So he said, no problem. So I took him to a large warehouse store called Costco's.
When we got there, he got out like an ID card in order to get in.
Turns out I did need to get a card. I came here because I ran out of digital film. So I came in to get new DVD film.
I said, Gary, you got like a credit card to get in here? And he said, well, it's not exactly a credit card, but it's like a membership card that you pay on.
Now, at this point, I'm thinking to myself, well, he suggested credit card. It was probably just unconscious.
And we went in there, and they actually didn't have any tape. And while I was there, I was hungry.
So I order him a sandwich. We sit down, and he says, look over there.
Our tires lined up along a wall.
And over there is this chain link fence with all these tires piled up, drawn virtually like he had in his diagram. And then he says, he looks all around, and he says, Gary, look at this. And there are umbrellas. And we're talking about a lot of umbrellas. There had to be at least 10 umbrellas in there. Huge beach umbrellas.
In the the post test. And there are umbrellas.
And then I noticed this writing on these umbrellas. And I will never forget this for as long as I live. It turned out they were advertising for Hebrew National Hot Dogs. And the slogan says, "We answer to a higher authority." The Spirit of God? Question mark. It was at that particular moment that I realized that his dreams were much more sophisticated than just seeing boats or seeing a car with 4 flat tires. It was also seeing events that I could not have predicted, but nonetheless were happening with a level of detail that was even reminding us about one of the deep messages that Christopher was thinking about, was that there was some larger purpose or intelligence that was going on in his work.
Well, there's really no perfect experiment, because whatever you do, somebody will turn up and say you should have done something else.
It certainly needs to be published, and anyone holding back such a paper would be interfering with the natural progress of scientific discovery.
I believe it really needs to be studied. The scientific community owes it to all of us to find out what on earth this is.
The Arizona experiments were pretty complicated. I mean, to be fair to all concerned, it was a pretty elaborate experiment.
I think the Arizona experiment could actually turn out to be one of the greatest scientific experiments in history.
I would say it's a good show in terms of just, sort of seeing something quite extraordinary. But a paper submitted to a scientific journal must obviously be more than just a good show.
If you bring a medium into the laboratory, they are almost on trial from many parapsychologists, and some of these parapsychologists, naming no names, are almost eager always to disprove what the medium is doing. How can a medium work at their best in such circumstances?
Well, Chris Robinson joins us along with parapsychologist Dr. Richard Wiseman. Good morning, nice to see you both.
For years, Chris has been at odds with the skeptics, and in particular, Britain's most well-known media skeptic, Richard Wiseman.
Which is just coincidence. But the important thing is that you can test these abilities, that the anecdotal data is very curious. Unfortunately, when you do properly controlled tests, things don't work out quite as well. I mean, for example, Chris, we've tested, we asked him to predict tell us the nature of 3 crimes, which we had as sort of target crimes. We asked students to do the same, to pretend to be psychic and have some guesses. It turned out that the students were more accurate than the psychic.
I want to say that I disagree with the way he did that test. Because,
Well, you would.
Of course I would. Of course I would. Well, and I just wanted to say my bit.
Chris claims that skeptics like Wiseman design experiments that are intended to fail, while the skeptics maintain that Chris is a fraud.
Well, I think it does sort of demonstrate Chris's rather creative memory, because we have a tape of what happened that day and it doesn't match up with that. The important thing is we're actually going to do another test where we're both going to be happy with the condition.
First of all, my view of so-called psychical researchers is that most of them are academic idiots.
There are skeptics who will never, ever be convinced that anything in psychic research or parapsychology are genuine studies of the paranormal.
There are a professional band of skeptics who make a vast fortune out of putting down the truth of this phenomena.
I think that part of the trouble is that the scientist who knows nothing about it will say, psychical research, oh, that's spiritualism, oh, that's medieval superstition, oh, that's witchcraft, oh, we must stop this before we go back to the Dark Ages.
Obviously, somebody like me who's been predicting terrorist incidents to the police for 13 years, that's all recorded. The skeptics can say what they like, the police know that it's true.
And a skeptic could claim that if you mention enough things in your dream, something is bound to correspond with what you see on the target. On the other hand, in defense of Chris, I would say that some of the specific predictions were so unusual and were so totally accurate that I really don't think chance guesswork is enough of an explanation for the series as a whole.
They get results, as do the psychical researchers. And therefore, again, you say to the skeptic, either study it yourself or shut up.
There have been hundreds of dreams where I've known about serious crimes or terrorist activity prior to it actually happening. Most of the time, it's just interesting. You can't participate, you can't help anybody. You just helplessly watch it happen.
About 2/3 of the way through the experiment, Christopher relayed that he had a nightmare.
Just before 9 o'clock this morning in New York, a passenger jet which had taken off from Boston slammed into the World Trade Center. Thick black smoke blotted out the Manhattan skyline.
And he told me, and he told a number of other people in the bar at the hotel, that in his dream there was this big city and he saw these planes crashing into this tall building and thousands of people were dying. Now, I could not imagine this. Remember, this is in early August. I said, Christopher, I said, do you have any sense about when this is going to happen? He said, no. I said, do you know exactly where it's going to happen? He said, no. And he asked me, he said, is this part of the experiment? I said, no. And so what I did was I dismissed it. I couldn't even imagine that this was a possibility.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
And I let it go. I didn't think about it for the rest of the time he was there. But when he went back to England, he continued to have dreams about this. And then in early September, he called me and he told me that these dreams were continuing. And of course, one thing led to another. And he ultimately, finally, a few days before, actually sent a CD of the 10-day in Arizona experiment to the, I think it was the American Embassy, trying to get their attention that something was imminent was happening.
After 9/11, I was contacted by people from American agencies. Now that would be quite natural. First of all, I'd written to the London Embassy telling them that I had information about these terrorist incidents and sent them discs of the Arizona experiments. And I posted that letter to the London American Embassy on the Sunday before 9/11.
And then on the day of 9/11, of course, the impossible happened. And all of a sudden, I realized what Christopher must be living with. Imagine if you could be having dreams about something absolutely horrific happening and you knew that if you could just get the information to the right people, it might be prevented. And here you are, even flying from England to the southwest of the United States to trying to get a scientist to look at what you're doing with an open but careful mind. And still, you can't get the information communicated in a way that it might save lives.
The evidence for paranormal phenomena is overwhelmingly persuasive.
Yes, I have come to the conclusion that this is a very real phenomenon and that we have to take it very seriously.
I mean, precognition may be impossible, but it's also true.
His gift, stroke curse, is so extraordinary that people are always going to doubt what he predicts.
Chris is not going to be around forever. He may be absolutely unique. So it would be foolhardy for science to ignore Chris Robinson and his premonitions.